Anneliese Michel was born on September 21, 1952, to a fairly normal Bavarian family in West Germany. The Michels were heavily into Catholicism, but that wasn't all that surprising considering 70% of the almost 11 million residents were Catholic at the time. Still, Anneliese's family was more religious than most. Her parents forced her and her three sisters to go to Catholic Mass twice a week. Her mother in particular pushed her to pray and devote as much extra time as possible towards religious devotion. According to the doctors Anneliese met with later, she developed neurosis related to religious iconography as a result of punishments inflicted upon her as a young girl. Remember this diagnosis, as it'll come into play later. Still, as religiously oppressive as the Michel house was, Anneliese's friends said she was initially a great student, showed strength in language study, and was happy and playful. The constant helicopter parenting and strict religious upbringing she had to endure would come back to haunt the family, almost literally several years later. Whether it was possession or mental illness, Anneliese's condition began rather gradually over a period of years. While at school one day in 1968, a then 16-year-old Anneliese unexpectedly blacked out for a few minutes. During this first documented blackout, her classmates said she fell into a trance-like state. Anneliese says she didn't remember the event and claims she was fine after the ordeal, but the same night she woke up feeling like there was a presence pressing heavily down on her body and then went to bed. Anneliese's parents kept her home the following day, and it seemed like it was a one-off occurrence. Anneliese said she felt fine, and she was until August of 1968. Less than a year later, Anneliese experienced a similar episode and was taken to a local hospital to determine what had happened. Her doctor, Dr. Vogt, referred her to a neurologist, Dr. Siegfried Luthi. After an examination and a series of tests, Dr. Luthi couldn't find anything wrong with her brain function. Physically, Anneliese seemed completely healthy, a clean bill of health. It wasn't until sometime in February of 1970 that Anneliese experienced a third event. After catching tuberculosis and spending months in a hospital, Anneliese had her third blackout. When the other patients in the hospital found out she had wet her bed during her blackout, they openly mocked her and excluded her from any group activity. This third blackout was different, though. Anneliese said she saw colors, heard sounds, and experienced feelings of euphoria while praying with her rosary beads. After more tests, a second neurologist, Dr. von Haller, diagnosed her with epilepsy and prescribed her medication. That's when Anneliese's condition got worse. Anneliese eventually returned to school later in 1970, but now she was depressed and withdrawn around her friends, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that the frequency of her seizures increased. Her doctor's visits offered no insight into where the root of her seizures were coming from, which only compounded her family's frustration with the situation. Anneliese pressed on, though. She threw herself into researching Catholicism while finishing up high school, and in 1973, she enrolled at the University of Würzburg to become a teacher. She continued to take medication during this time, but her condition was rapidly worsening. By mid-73, Anneliese experienced hallucinations while praying and believed she was damned. She was obsessed with the idea that the devil was inside her and began to see a priest along with her doctors. By late 73, Anneliese's strange behavior and erratic symptoms kicked into overdrive. Her parents took her out of college and kept her confined, mostly to her bedroom. It was during this time when she started taking Tegretol, an anti-seizure drug and mood stabilizer. It should also be noted that at this time, Anneliese said she heard a knocking in her bedroom. Her sisters confirmed that they heard the knocking as well. She also said she heard a voice that would regularly damn her to hell. Despite taking her daily cocktail of neuroleptic medications, Anneliese's symptoms worsened. She started growling like an animal, she saw demons, and she exhibited Hulk-like strength to the point that she'd throw her sister around the house like a rag doll. She'd also lick her urine off the floor, chew coal, rip her clothes off, and eat insects she found around the house. Religious items like crucifixes and holy water also drove her mad. Her mother said she once caught Anneliese staring at a framed portrait of the Virgin Mary. She said her daughter's eyeballs were 100% jet black. This all sounds like the classic symptoms of what the church would consider demonic possession. Anneliese's family eventually asked several local priests for an exorcism, but the men declined and encouraged the Michels to continue with the traditional medical treatment she was already receiving. Besides, it wasn't that easy. A Catholic exorcism required the bishop's permission. Sometime in September of 1973, the Michels met Father Ernst Alt, a local priest who, upon meeting Anneliese, almost immediately said she didn't look like an epileptic and claimed she wasn't suffering from seizures. Father Alt was convinced she was possessed by demons and got the local bishop to give permission for the exorcism. Bishop Joseph Stangl eventually granted Father Arnold Renz permission to exorcise Anneliese in compliance with the Ritual Romanum of 1614, but ordered the exorcism to be done in complete secrecy. While Renz performed Anneliese's first exorcism on September 24, 1975, she began to talk about dying to atone for the wayward youth of the day and the apostate priests of the modern church. Eventually, she stopped eating because she said she was not permitted to anymore. By this point, Anneliese's parents gave up consulting doctors and cut her off her medication. Instead, they relied solely on the exorcisms, 67 exorcisms in all, over an 11-month span in 1975 and 1976, to be exact. It wasn't unusual for Anneliese to endure 2 sessions a week, some sessions lasting up to 4 hours. And in audio recordings from the sessions, you can clearly hear Anneliese's distorted guttural voice. She growls like a wild beast, and you can hear the utterances she made in response to the religious ritual. And these all sound super creepy. The gruesome audio recordings during her exorcisms also reveal that Fathers Renz and Alt talked to 6 spirits allegedly possessing Anneliese. These spirits, or personalities if that's what they were, made up a murderer's row of evil incarnate. Lucifer, Judas Iscariot, Nero, Cain, Hitler, and Valentin Fleischmann, a disgraced Frankish priest from the 16th century. Given Anneliese's history with religion and her obsession with Christian teachings, there were later theories that Anneliese chose these figures intentionally. It's almost impossible not to agree. Despite being pretty much skin and bones at this point, Anneliese still had to be held down while her exorcisms took place. This abuse, along with a lack of medical treatment and food or water, took a toll on her body, and she died at home on July 1, 1976. On her death certificate, it read that Anneliese ultimately died of malnutrition and dehydration, though her autopsy revealed she also had fractured teeth, 2 black eyes, and bruises on her hands, arms, and wrists. She also had broken knees and numerous wounds on her body. Fathers Alt and Renz, as well as Anneliese's parents, faced trial for a negligent homicide in 1978. The priest boldly maintained the exorcism was successful and liberated Anneliese from the demons possessing her. Alt even doubled down and insisted that some of Anneliese's wounds that were documented in her autopsy were the stigmata. The evidence didn't line up, though, and Anneliese's alleged demonic possession wasn't enough to sway the German court's 3-judge panel. All parties were found guilty, but their sentences varied. Alt and Renz were charged with manslaughter and given 6 months in prison with suspended sentences. Anneliese's parents received no punishment, as the German legal system deemed they had experienced enough suffering. So there's really only one main question to ask, and it's an important one. Was Anneliese Michel possessed by Satan or some other dark, sinister force? Or was she suffering from an undiagnosed mental illness?
Ja, ich will auch für die anderen leiden, damit die nicht in die Hölle kommen und so. Aber dass die dann so schlimm ist und so grausam und so furchtbar, nee. Das denkt man leiden, das ist so leichte Sache, aber wenn es dann wirklich schlimm wird, da will man überhaupt nicht mehr, da will mein Kind schlafen.
Nein, ihr Klötze! Er war mir Klötze! Oh, so gerne will er nicht, oh, ich gerne nicht, oh.
Sind wir schon 3?
Ah, wie. Was ist so eine Scheiße?
Als Kind Gottes.
Ich hab ein Moderschlag!
Namen des Vaters
Die Ruhe! Ruhe gibt's nur da oben!
Ruhe gibt's nur dort, wo die Liebe ist.
Ja, bei uns gibt's nur
Nur Hass.
Ja.
Und wo nur Hass ist, da gibt's keine Ruhe.
Nein. Und für uns gibt's nie Ruhe. Nie.
Weil
In der Ewigkeit. Und jetzt bin ich verdammt. Die müssen in eigenen Seminaren ausgebildet werden, die dürfen nicht auf die anderen Universitäten. Kapiert?
Klar. Ist da sonst noch etwas zu sagen?
Weil
Weil der Teufel größere Macht.
im Namen deines seligen Jungfrau, im Namen Jesu, befehle ich dir auszufahren. Im Namen des dreifaltigen Gottes, des Vaters, im Namen des dreifaltigen Geistes, befehle ich dir auszufahren und nicht.
Weißt du, Maria?